Colorado Territory, 1858. The late sun spilled over Eagle Creek in ripples of gold and amber, catching the current like liquid fire. 12-year-old Lira Dane crouched at the bank, scooping handfuls of cold mountain water to cool her dust-stung face. Her father's military column had pitched camp a quarter-mile behind her, but Lira had slipped away, drawn to the hush of running water and the quiet it promised. Grant Dane, her father, had dragged her west after her mother's passing, insisting she would be safer with him than with distant kin. Sometimes Lira wondered if it was simply that he couldn't face the empty rooms of their Boston home. Grant commanded Fort Collins with the unyielding certainty of a man who believed order could be hammered into any wilderness. As Lira splashed her face again, a prickle climbed her spine. Someone was watching. Not a threat, just present. She lifted her chin slowly. Across the narrow creek stood a boy, maybe a year older, Apache youth with dark, steady eyes full of wonder and caution. They didn't speak. They didn't even breathe. Lira had overheard the soldiers whisper about the Apache, cruel, relentless, more spirit than flesh. The boy before her looked nothing like the ghost stories. He wore simple clothing, his posture straight, his expression solemn. Then mirroring her, he eased down to one knee at the water's edge. The creek ran between them both, a boundary and a strange bridge. "I'm Lira," she whispered, doubting he understood a word. He tilted his head, studying her pale skin, the loose curls brushing her shoulders. And then, to her surprise, he answered in careful accented English. "Kairos. It means friend to all." The unexpected gentleness of it made her smile. "Do you live near here?" Kairos nodded toward the jagged peaks rising behind him. "My people camp beneath the tall mountains." He hesitated, eyes flicking toward her clothing. "Your people." "They are soldiers." It wasn't a question. Lira nodded. "My father leads them." Something passed over his face, recognition, maybe a tired understanding. He should have slipped away then. They both knew discovery meant danger. But neither moved. Instead, Kairos reached into a small pouch at his belt and held out his hand. A polished stone lay in his palm, red and gold bands glowing softly. "For courage," he said simply. Lira hesitated only a heartbeat before reaching across the creek. Their fingertips brushed, and something surged between them. A spark, ancient and wordless. She saw it flicker in his expression, too. Her father's aide suddenly shouted her name from the trees. Lira whispered, "I have to go." Kairos dipped his chin once, before stepping silently into the shadows of the pines, vanishing, as though he'd never been there. Lira pressed the warm stone to her chest and tucked it into her dress pocket. Only then did she answer the calls. That night, curled inside her canvas tent, she held the stone to her heart and replayed the strange meeting until sleep stole over her. She didn't understand what had stirred between them, but she knew one thing with startling certainty. She would see Kairos again. 7 years later, Lira Dane stood at the window of her father's house on the edge of Fort Collins, watching the sun sink behind the Rockies. At 19, she had grown into a quiet, resilient woman. The frontier had bronzed her skin, streaked her dark hair with gold, but her green eyes burned with the same fire they always had. Lira, her father called from his study. "Come in here, please," she sighed. Another lecture. Another reminder of duty, marriage expectations. Since her 18th birthday, Grant Dane had tightened his grip on the future he wanted for her. "Yes, father," she said, stepping into the book-lined study where he sat behind his heavy oak desk. Grant Dane had aged sharply. Steel gray hair, lines cut deep by a war worry, and the land itself. Conflict with the tribes had hardened him further. "Brant Keller will join us for supper tomorrow," he said without looking up. "I expect you to be gracious." Lira kept her voice polite. "Of course. He's a fine officer. Distinguished himself in the campaign against the Cheyenne. Promotion is certain by year's end." "Is that all that matters to you?" she asked quietly. Rank Grant's eyes narrowed. "What should matter more? He can protect you, Provide for you. Out here, that's no small thing. Lira turned to the window again. Far beyond the fort, she could see the faint line of Eagle Peak, the place she had first met Kairos, the place she still met him, when she could slip away unseen. I'm not afraid of this territory, she said. You should be. His answer hung in the room like a closing door. Her father answered with a voice like scraped iron. The Apache have struck 3 settlements to the south. 3 families killed just last month. Not every Apache raids. Lira replied before she could stop herself. Grant Dane rose stiffly from behind his desk. And what would you know of that? You've been sheltered inside these walls. If only he knew. Lira bit back the words burning her tongue. For 7 years she had hidden the truth. For 7 years she and Kairos had met in the half-light, first as curious children, then as friends, and now as something deeper. Something she barely dared name. I'll wear the blue dress tomorrow, she said, shifting the conversation. Will that suit you? Her father gave a short nod, satisfied for the moment. Brant Keller will appreciate the gesture. He mentioned how fine it looked on you at last month's officers' ball. Lira dipped her head politely and withdrew to her room. As soon as the door closed, she opened the small drawer beside her bed and lifted out the stone Kairos had once given her. Its surface had been worn smooth by years of her holding it, tracing it whenever she missed him. Tonight she was meant to meet him at their usual place along Eagle Creek. When darkness settled over the house, she waited. Grant retired early, worn down by paperwork and command. Once his snoring rattled through the hallway, Lira wrapped a dark shawl around her shoulders and slipped quietly out of her window. She knew the trail as well as her own heartbeat. She could have walked it blind. The night air was crisp stars scattered overhead like hammered silver. Somewhere deeper in the timber, an owl called out. Lira moved quickly, her pulse rising as she neared the clearing where everything in her life felt real. Kairos was already waiting, a still figure washed in moonlight. At 20, he had grown tall, broad-shouldered, carrying the dignified bearing of his people. He wore traditional clothing tonight, though she knew he sometimes borrowed settler garments when he had to slip through white towns unnoticed. I thought you might not come, he said quietly as she approached. I'll always come, she whispered, stepping into his arms. His embrace closed warmly around her. Lira rested her cheek over his heartbeat, steady grounding. These meetings were stolen, precious and growing more dangerous as tensions rose between settlers and Apache bands. My father is trying to marry me off, she murmured, her face brushing his shirt. To Brant Keller. She felt Kairos tense, though he kept his voice controlled. The officer with the scar on his chin, the one who led the strike on that Cheyenne village, she nodded. He's coming to dinner tomorrow. Kairos leaned back just enough to search her eyes. His calloused palm lifted to cup her cheek. And what will you do? Refuse him, she said without hesitation. I belong with you. I have since the first day by the creek. The words hung between them, heavy with all the years they had survived. They had spent countless hours together, Kairos teaching her the ways of his people, Lira sharing the world of books and faraway ideas. They had traded language stories, dreams. They had watched winters break into spring and spring slip into fall in the hidden places only they shared. And somewhere along the way, they had fallen irrevocably in love. My people want me to marry too, Kairos admitted, voice low. Tali, daughter of a respected elder. A sharp sting of jealousy pierced Lira's chest. Is she beautiful? A faint smile brushed Kairos' lips. She is considered so. And do you care for her? I respect her, he said, simply tucking a strand of hair behind Lira's ear. But my heart was given when I was 13. Lira, it cannot be offered twice. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the truth ringing in his voice. When she opened them again, resolve replaced doubt. We could leave, she whispered. North to Canada, south to Mexico, anywhere we can live free. Kairos grew still, and leave our families, our people, if that's the cost. He pondered her words, shadows passing across his face. At last he said, "My grandfather showed me a place once high in the mountains, a hidden valley where two rivers meet. If we ever had to run, that is where I would take you." Lira lifted her gaze to his. "Promise me, if they try to pull us apart, we go there. I promise." And he sealed that promise with a kiss. It began softly, then deepened urgency, pulling them together. Lira wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing close as though she could fold her life into his and let the world fall away. His hands steadied her waist. For a moment, every barrier race history wore melted like frost in sunlight. They were simply two souls who had found each other in a brutal world. When their lips finally parted, breathless, Lira leaned her forehead against his. "I should get back before someone notices." Kairos nodded, though he didn't release her. "2 nights from now, same hour." "Yes," Lira promised. "I'll be here." Kairos brushed a lingering kiss across her forehead before letting her slip from his arms. "Until then, keep the stone near. I always do." Reluctantly, Lira stepped back, feeling the night air rush into the space his warmth vacated. She turned to leave, but instinct made her glance over her shoulder. Kairos stood motionless in the silver wash of moonlight, his gaze anchored to her. In that single heartbeat, she understood whatever storms were coming, they would face them side by side. Neither realized a shadowed figure lay hidden among the pines, nor heard the soft retreat of boots through thick underbrush. Grant Keller had prided himself on discipline his entire career. 11 years in the U.S. Army had taught him to hold a mask of calm over whatever fury churned beneath it. That mask served him well the next evening as he sat across from Lira Dane at her father's dinner table, smiling politely, while rage burned hot behind his ribs. "The venison is excellent, Colonel," he said, slicing it cleanly. "Your cook outdid herself." Grant Dane nodded with satisfaction. "Mira Hatcher came west with us from Boston. I couldn't manage this household without her." Lira pushed her food around, quietly, appetite lost. She wore the blue dress she'd promised, her dark hair gathered neatly at her nape. She looked stunning and deceitful. Grant had followed her the previous night on a whim. He'd expected a tryst with some young officer, scandalous. Yes, but controllable. What he saw instead had nearly made him draw his pistol. An Apache. She had wrapped her arms around an Apache man. She had kissed him. His grip tightened around his knife. He'd almost confronted them right then, but caution and the potential usefulness of this discovery held him back. Lira Grant snapped. "Captain Keller asked you something." She startled and looked up. "Forgive me." My mind wandered. Clearly her father admonished. The captain asked about the new lending library. "Oh, yes. It's quite lovely. They brought in books from Chicago last month." Grant offered a thin smile. "I always say a well-read woman makes excellent company, though. Naturally, there must be limits to what a lady should read." Lira's eyes sharpened. "And who decides those limits?" "Captain men, afraid educated women might start thinking on their own, Lira," Grant barked. Grant raised a calming hand. "It's quite all right, Colonel. I appreciate Miss Dane's spirit." Then he looked at her with pointed intent. "I only meant that some books teach ideas that can mislead a young woman. Equality among races, for example. Notions that disrupt the natural order." A flicker of color drained from Lira's face, though her voice stayed steady. "Perhaps the natural order isn't as divine as some people like to pretend." A heavy silence smothered the table. Grant finally cleared his throat. "Let's retire to the sitting room for coffee." "A fine idea," Grant said, rising and offering Lira his arm. She touched the fabric lightly, not daring to refuse. As they walked, Grant leaned in close, his words a quiet blade. "I know where you were last night, and who you were with." Lira stumbled, eyes flying to his face. "Knowledge, calculation, threat." "I don't know what you mean," she whispered. Oh, I believe you do. His smile remained pleasant, his eyes chilling. We'll speak later. In private. The rest of the evening blurred into a haze. Lira poured coffee, answered pointless questions, even played piano while her mind raced. Brant knew. Somehow he knew about Kairos. And she had no doubt he intended to weaponize that knowledge. When Brant finally said his goodbyes, he took her hand, squeezing until pain shot up her fingers. Until tomorrow, Miss Dane. I look forward to our ride. Ride, she echoed. Yes, Grant confirmed. I told Captain Keller he may escort you tomorrow afternoon. The weather should hold. Every instinct screamed for her to refuse, but Brant's warning stare froze the words in her throat. How thoughtful, she managed. After Brant departed and Grant retreated to his study with a glass of brandy, Lira hurried to her room. Panic churned through her. She had to warn Kairos. They needed to run, tonight, before Brant could maneuver. She changed into her simplest dress, packed a few essentials into a small satchel, and scribbled a brief note to her father. It would break his heart, but she had no choice. She couldn't stand the thought of Kairos being dragged into danger because of her. She was just about to slip through her window when a knock rattled her bedroom door. Lira froze. Lira, her father's voice, carried through the wood. May I come in? She shoved the bag under her bed. Yes, father. Grant Dane stepped inside, still holding a half-finished glass of brandy. His expression was impossible to read as he closed the door behind him. Brant Keller has asked for your hand in marriage. Lira's heart dropped. Father, I told him I would speak with you, but I also said I saw no reason to refuse the match. He sipped his drink. He's a fine officer. Excellent prospects. I don't love him. Grant dismissed this with a wave. Love grows after respect. My marriage to your mother began that way and became something deep. This isn't the same, Lira insisted. I cannot marry Brant Keller. I won't. Grant studied her carefully. There's someone else. It wasn't a question. Lira stayed silent. Your silence is answer enough. He sighed heavily. Who is he? One of the lieutenant's chambers, perhaps. I've seen him staring at you. No, Lira said quietly. No one you would approve of. His gaze hardened. What does that mean? Lira lifted her chin. It means I've made my choice, father. And it isn't Captain Keller. Grant said nothing for a long moment. Then he emptied his brandy, set the glass sharply on her dresser, and straightened. You're upset. We'll speak again in the morning after you've slept and reconsidered. I won't change my mind. We shall see. He started toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. I've ordered the gates closed. No one leaves the fort tonight without my permission. For your safety. The door closed behind him like the lid of a trap. Lira sank onto her bed, panic crashing over her. Her father's meaning had been clear. She was a prisoner. She could not warn Kairos, could not escape, could only wait for whatever Brant Keller intended. She clutched the smooth stone Kairos had given her, but tonight its comfort felt thin, fragile. Whatever tomorrow brought, she knew her life was about to change forever. The next morning dawned bright and deceptively calm, sunlight sparkling across the parade ground as if mocking her dread. Lira dressed mechanically in her dark green riding habit. Nola, her maid, chattered cheerfully while pinning up her hair, completely unaware of the storm twisting in Lira's chest. Captain Keller is such a handsome man, Nola said, fastening a pin. And that scar, why it makes him look like a hero out of a dime novel. Lira said nothing. To her, the long scar cutting across Brant Keller's chin was no badge of honor, but a mark of cruelty. She had heard him boasting once how he earned it while fighting Cheyenne women and children. At precisely 2 o'clock he arrived. Lira descended the stairs with leaden steps. In the foyer, Grant Dane beamed proudly, the perfect picture of a father pleased with his daughter's bright future, if only he knew the truth. Don't stay out long, Grant warned. There have been Apache sightings. Brant flashed a cold smile. I assure you, sir, I can handle any Apache we come across. They rode from the fort together, Lira on her dappled mare, Brant on a powerful bay gelding. After following the main road for a while, he suddenly veered onto a narrower trail, cutting toward the foothills. "Where are we going?" Lira asked, speaking for the first time since they'd left. "Someplace quiet," Brant said lightly. "A place where we can talk." "About what?" "About your Apache lover." Lira's fingers clamped down on the reins. "I don't know what you're talking about. Come now, Miss Dane. Let's not insult each other." He guided his horse closer. "I saw you 2 nights ago, at the creek. Quite the tender reunion." Lira said nothing, her mind racing. Running now would be pointless. His gelding outmatched her mare by far. And even if she could outrun him, where would she go? Back to her father, into another locked room. "What do you want?" she forced out. "The same thing I've always wanted." Brant replied smoothly. "You. As my wife. Never." He clicked his tongue, his tone turning cold. "Consider the consequences. If I tell your father what I witnessed, he'll send soldiers after your Apache friend. Kairos will swing from a rope before sunrise. And you'll be shipped east in disgrace, locked away by some grim old aunt until you fade into nothing." Lira felt sick. "Why would you want to marry someone who despises you?" Lira asked, her voice shaking. "Because I'm Grant Dane's daughter, is that it?" Partly, Brant Keller replied, his expression carved from stone. "With the colonel's backing, I'll make general before I'm 40. Then with a cold flick of his eyes, he added, "And because you're beautiful, well-bred, and will make a fine hostess as I rise." "I'll run away," she warned. "To where?" "With whom you're savage," he laughed under his breath. "I've already sent men to locate his camp. By nightfall he'll be dead or shackled." Lira's blood iced over. "You're lying." "Am I?" Brant lifted an eyebrow. "Red Marston and 6 men rode out at dawn. Efficient men, especially Marston. He's carried a grudge against the Apache ever since his brother was butchered at San Carlos." Her thoughts churned wildly. She had to warn Kairos. His people's camp was hidden deep in those mountains, but a determined patrol might still find it. Or worse, they might find Kairos traveling alone to meet her. "If you harm him," she said fiercely, "I will never forgive you. I'll make every day of our marriage a hell you'll regret." Brant's expression didn't shift. "You'll accept your fate as women always do. And perhaps eventually you'll even appreciate me." His tone held a threat wrapped in velvet. Lira straightened, summoning whatever strength she had left. "Take me back to the fort. Now. Not yet." Brant guided his horse in front of hers, blocking her escape. "You'll give me your answer. Will you marry me willingly, or shall I inform your father about your Apache?" Hatred blazed through her. "If I agree, will you recall your men? Will you leave Kairos alone?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Kairos? So that's his name." His smile was razor thin. "How touching. You're close enough to trade names." "Answer me," Lira demanded. "If I marry you, will you leave him unharmed?" Brant considered her for a long moment. "I suppose I could call Marston back. A wedding gift to my bride." She didn't believe him, not for a second, but there was no other path. She needed time. Time to warn Kairos. Time to run. Time to plan. "Fine," she whispered, tasting ash. "I'll marry you." Brant's smile bloomed triumphantly. "I knew you'd see reason." He reached into his coat and drew out a small velvet box. "I came prepared." Inside lay a gold ring crowned with a single diamond, beautiful, expensive, and to Lira, more suffocating than iron bars. "Your hand," Brant said. Slowly, unwillingly, Lira lifted her left hand. His fingers clamped around hers, sliding the ring into place. It felt heavy. Wrong. "Now," he said, "let's return to the fort. We'll tell your father the happy news." As they rode back toward the road, Lira's mind raced. She would get a message to Kairos. They would meet at their secret place tonight, and then they would flee. To the hidden valley he once spoke of, or, beyond it, someplace Grant and her father could never reach. Her hand closed around the stone in her pocket. Strength pulsed through her. This was not the end. Only another wall to break through. What she didn't know was that fate had already begun shifting elsewhere. Red Marston had never considered himself a cruel man, firm, yes, relentless certainly, but never cruel. Yet as he led his patrol through the foothills, following faint signs of Apache movement, he felt a dark weight stirring in him. The memory of his younger brother Jaron Reed, mutilated at San Carlos, was a wound that never closed. Jaron had been just 20, new to the Arizona territory, when Apache raiders overwhelmed his patrol. What had been done to the bodies? No words could capture it. Sir Fen Doyle called quietly, pointing at the dust. Tracks, fresh ones. Marston dismounted, studying the prints. One rider moving fast. He looked toward the cliffs ahead. He's headed for that range. Should we divide the squad? Hoyt Calder asked. Cover more ground, Marston considered, then shook his head. No. We stay as one. If we find their camp, we'll need every rifle. What Captain Keller had told him seemed outlandish. Lira Dane involved with an Apache warrior, but orders were orders. Locate the Apache camp. Find a man named Kairos. Bring him in, alive if possible, dead if necessary. The patrol pressed upward into the mountains. The air thinned. Pines cast long, sharp shadows across the trail. Marston felt eyes on them from the ridges above, though he could see no one. The Apache were masters of disappearing into the land. Red Marston knew that well. They could be all around them now. Stay sharp, he warned his men. Check your rifles. The trail vanished once they reached a rocky shelf where the ground was too hard for tracks to hold. Marston swore under his breath. We've lost him, Fen Doyle muttered. No, Marston said, his gaze sweeping the barren rise. He's guiding us somewhere, or trying to pull us away from something. He pointed toward a narrow slit between two towering slabs of stone. Through there. It's the only route that makes sense. They moved carefully, guns ready. The gap spilled them into a small valley cut by a fast-running stream. It looked deserted at first glance. Then Marston spotted it, a faint thread of smoke curling up from behind a cluster of cottonwoods. He motioned for silence and signaled his men to fan out. Heart pounding, Marston eased forward, rifle raised. He expected a campfire, maybe a couple of scouts. Instead, he found a single teepee by the water, a small fire dying beside it. A lone woman stood at the edge of the stream, dipping a clay pot into the water. She wore a Apache dress, her long black braid falling straight down her back. Marston hesitated. This wasn't a raiding party. Just one woman alone, unaware. Then she turned, sensing movement, and froze when she saw the soldiers stepping from the shadows. Her eyes widened in fear. The pot slipped from her hands and shattered on the rocks. She reached for something at her waist. A knife, Marston realized too late. Hold, he shouted. But Fen Doyle had already fired. The shot cracked through the valley like a hammer blow. The woman staggered, shock sweeping over her as blood blossomed across the front of her dress. She dropped to her knees, then collapsed face first into the shallow stream. God damn it, Doyle, Marston snapped, rounding on him. I didn't give the order. Doyle's face had drained of color. She had a weapon, sir. I thought. You didn't think, Marston growled. He splashed into the water and turned the woman gently onto her back. He knew even before he touched her that nothing could be done. The bullet had gone clean through her heart. Her eyes stared blankly at the sky, fingers still curled around the small knife. Marston closed her eyes with his fingertips. Lord, forgive us, he whispered. The thunder of hooves tore through the valley. A rider came charging toward them at full gallop, an Apache warrior on a paint horse. Grief and fury carved into every line of his face. Take cover! Marston barked, scrambling out of the stream with his pistol drawn. But the warrior didn't care. He leapt from his horse while it was still barreling forward and fell to his knees beside the woman. His cry, raw broken, needed no translation. "Hold your fire!" Marston ordered sharply as his men raised their rifles. Every instinct in him screamed that this was wrong. Terribly wrong. This wasn't a threat. This was a man finding the person he loved dead. The warrior pulled the woman into his arms, rocking her gently, his voice tearing out of him in anguish. Marston felt shame twist inside him. This was the truth of frontier war. Not glory, not victory, just heartbreak. "Sir," Hoyt Calder whispered, "what are your orders?" Marston hesitated. His mission was to find Kairos, the Apache tied to Lira Dane. Could this be him? The timing fit, but he couldn't be sure. Before he could decide, the warrior lowered the woman onto the bank and rose slowly. When he finally turned toward them, his eyes burned with a hatred so pure it was almost breathtaking. "Which one of you murdered her?" he asked in flawless English. The soldiers exchanged startled glances. Marston stepped forward. "It was an accident. She reached for a weapon, a knife for skinning rabbits," the warrior said, voice like sharpened steel. "For our meal." Fen Doyle shifted nervously, and the warrior's gaze locked onto him. "She was to be my wife," he said. "Tomorrow we were to stand before our people. Her name was Tali." Marston felt his stomach drop. Tali. Not Lira Dane. Not Kairos. This wasn't the warrior they were hunting. This was another man entirely. And they had just killed his bride. A mistake so grave it could never be undone. "I'm sorry," Marston said quietly, understanding how pointless the words were. "We can help bury her. Give her proper—" "You will leave this place," the warrior cut in coldly. "You will leave her to our ways." He paused. "And then I will hunt each of you, one by one, until justice is done." Marston believed every word. The cold certainty in the warrior's eyes left no room for argument. "We're leaving," Red Marston said to his men. "Mount up." Sir Hoyt Calder started to protest. Our orders weren't to gun down unarmed women," Marston snapped. "Mount up, now." They rode out of the valley in grim silence. But Marston looked back once. Ravik had knelt beside Tali again, lifting her into his arms with a tenderness so deep it carved a mark into Marston's memory. He knew with an awful clarity that image would haunt him for the rest of his life. Lira Dane sat motionless in her bedroom, the diamond ring like a shackle around her finger, as she finished writing her note to Kairos. She had to warn him, had to tell him to hide, to go to their secret place in the mountains. But how could she get a message to him now? A soft knock at the door made her shove the note under a book. "Come in." Nola stepped inside with a tray of tea. "Thought you might need this, miss, after all the excitement." The engagement announcement had sent the entire fort buzzing. Grant Dane ordered champagne, and officers had toasted the newly promised couple with loud cheer. Lira had stood there, smiling on command, accepting congratulations with polite nods. But only her father had looked at her long enough to sense the truth hiding behind her composure. "Thank you, Nola," she murmured, taking the tea. An idea sparked. "Nola, could I ask a favor?" "Of course," Miss the maid replied warmly. "Would you take a note to someone for me, discreetly?" Nola's brows rose. "A note, miss." To whom Lira hesitated. Nola had been with her since childhood, half servant, half sister. If there was anyone she could trust. "I can't tell you who," Lira said softly, "or why. But it's important. More important than anything." Nola studied her face. "This has to do with the captain, doesn't it? You don't want to marry him." Lira's eyes filled before she could stop them. "Please, Nola, I wouldn't ask unless a life depended on it." Nola's expression softened. "Where do I take it?" To the bend at Eagle Creek where the big cottonwood stands. Leave it in the hollow at its base. Tonight, Nola asked. After dark, Lira whispered. Can you do that a beat? Then Nola nodded. Yes, miss. I can. Relief washed over Lira so forcefully she felt weak. Thank you. I'll never forget this. When Nola slipped out, Lira finished the message. Danger. We've been discovered. Keller sent soldiers after you. Meet me at our mountain place at midnight tomorrow. Bring only what you need. We must flee together. Always yours, Lira. She sealed it with wax and gave it to Nola when she returned an hour later. After sunset, Lira watched through her window as Nola slipped quietly from the servants' entrance, the note tucked deep in her apron. That night, Lira dreamed of blood on the dust of gunshots, echoing off canyon walls of Kairos, shouting her name as he was dragged away in chains. She woke gasping, sheets twisted around her, the small stone in her palm digging painfully into her skin. Morning brought Grant Keller back to the Dane home ostensibly to discuss wedding plans, though Lira knew he was really checking to ensure she hadn't vanished in the night. His smile shone with triumph as he offered her his arm for breakfast. Lieutenant Marston returned late last night, Keller said casually. Seems his mission did not go as well as expected. Lira's heart leapt. Oh, a regrettable mishap. His tone was almost bored. They encountered some Apache, shots were exchanged. A woman was killed. The fragile hope inside Lira shattered. Woman, yes, Keller said, tightening his grip. Apparently the bride-to-be of one of their warriors. Not your Kairos, sadly. But we'll find him soon enough. The malice in his voice made her stomach turn. You're a monster, she whispered. I'm a soldier, he corrected smoothly. I do what must be done. They reached the dining room. Shall we? He asked lightly. Your father is eager to discuss dates for the wedding. The day passed like a waking nightmare. Plans were made. Details settled. The wedding set for 2 weeks' time soon enough to accompany Keller to Fort Laramie, where he would serve as second in command. You'll love Laramie, Grant, Dane told her proudly. Far more civilized than this rough little garrison. But Lira felt nothing but dread. Lira nodded mutely. None of it mattered. By this time tomorrow, she would be gone, either safely away with Kairos or dead trying to reach him. She would never marry Grant Keller. She would never bind her life to a man who ordered the killing of innocents just to climb the ranks. As night closed in, she prepared with slow, deliberate care. She dressed in her plainest clothes, sturdy brown skirt, white blouse, worn leather boots. Over them, she wrapped a thick shawl to guard against the mountain chill. Into a small traveling bag she packed only what mattered, a spare set of clothes, the few dollars she had saved, her mother's locket, and the little knife Grant Dane once gave her for protection. When the house finally grew silent, she slipped through her window as she had so many times before. The night sky was clear and sharp stars scattered like cold sparks across the dark. Lira moved along the shadowed edges of the fort, breath, quick heart pounding. Once past the sentries, she would follow Eagle Creek upstream to the hidden place she and Kairos had chosen. She was only steps from the perimeter when a figure stepped into her path. Going somewhere, Miss Dane Grant Keller stood in her way, pistol in hand, his face a harsh silhouette in the moonlight. Lira felt the blood drain from her limbs. How did you... Your loyal maid isn't quite as loyal as you believed. His smile cut like a blade. She brought your note directly to me. Touching, really. Always yours. Makes one wonder just how intimate things are between you and that savage. Rage ignited inside her, hot and steady. He's twice the man you are, 10 times 100, she snapped. Keller's jaw hardened. You would choose an Apache over your own kind, my kind, she said coldly. Are the ones who still believe in honor, in decency, not cowards who slaughter unarmed women to soothe their egos. Something sharp and dangerous flickered in Keller's eyes. "You're overwrought, Catherine. Pardon, Lira." Confused. "I agree. You need rest. Complete rest. Until our wedding day." He lifted his hand, and 2 soldiers stepped out of the darkness behind her. "Take Miss Dane to her room. Post a guard at her door and under her window. She leaves when I say she leaves." No Lira bolted to the side, but Keller was faster. His hand clamped around her arm like iron. "This can be easy," he hissed, "or very difficult. Either way, you will be my wife in 2 weeks. And your Apache lover will be dead long before that. I will never marry you." Lira said each word sharp as glass. "Never." Keller's smile was winter cold. "We'll see." The soldiers escorted her back, 1 on each side, silent and unyielding. Grant Dane waited in the foyer, his expression a bitter mix of anger and humiliation. "You've disgraced yourself and this family," he said as she passed. "No, father." Lira answered steady, despite the tears burning her eyes. "You did that the moment you sided with a man like him." In her room, the lock clicked behind her. Lira sank onto her bed, shaking. She had failed. Failed to escape. Failed to warn Kairos. He would go to their meeting place. Wait for her. And Keller's men would close in. She pressed the smooth stone in her pocket, seeking the comfort it had always given her. Kairos was smart, swift. He would sense danger. He would not be taken easily. But even as she tried to cling to that belief, she knew the truth. She had started this, all of it, by loving someone the world said she had no right to love. And now both their lives hung on the edge of a blade. Kairos knelt at the bend of Eagle Creek, fingers tracing the outline of a boot print pressed into the soft mud. Soldiers. Many soldiers. Moving with purpose. He had come to retrieve Lira's message, as he always did. The hollow in the cottonwood tree had been their secret exchange for years. Tonight, the hollow was empty. Unease tightened in his gut. Lira had never missed leaving a note if their plans changed. Something was wrong. As he straightened, a twig snapped somewhere beyond the creek. Kairos froze. Another crack closer. He melted into the shadows, hand curling around the knife at his belt. A figure stepped from the trees on the far bank. A woman, cautious, hesitant. Not Lira. This woman was older, rounder, dressed in the plain clothes of a house servant. "Hello," she called softly. "Is someone there? I have a message." Kairos hesitated, caution and exhaustion wrestling inside him. At last he stepped out of the shadows. "Who are you?" The woman jerked in fright, a hand flying to her throat. Oh, mercy. You must be. Are you Kairos?" He gave a single guarded nod. "Who asks? I'm Nola." "Miss Lira's maid." Her fingers twisted together anxiously. "I've done something terrible. I betrayed her trust. But I came to set it right if I still can." Kairos crossed the shallow creek in 2 swift strides. "What do you mean?" "Where is Lira locked in her room?" Nola whispered, tears brimming. "The captain, Brant Keller, forced me to give him the note she wrote to you. He threatened to have my boy Sorrow thrown out of his post at the fort if I didn't obey. I was weak. I'm so sorry." A cold blade of fear drove straight through Kairos's chest. "What did the note say? That you were in danger? That soldiers were hunting for you? That you were to meet her in the mountains tomorrow at midnight so you could flee together?" Nola wiped her cheeks. "But now she's under guard, and Keller is sending more men into the mountains at first light." Kairos absorbed the news at once. "Why tell me this? Why risk helping us?" "Because I raised that girl from the time she was 12, Nola said softly. "Because I've never seen her look at anyone the way she does when she speaks of you. And because forcing her to marry that cruel man, it isn't right." Kairos stood perfectly still, thinking, measuring danger, weighing the few choices left to him. Then he reached a decision. Can you carry a message back to Lira? Nola nodded. I think so. They let me bring her meals. Tend to her needs. Tell her this. Kairos said quietly, where the rivers meet. 3 days. Wait for the owl's call. His gaze locked onto hers. Can you remember that? Where the rivers meet. 3 days. Wait for the owl's call, Nola repeated. I'll tell her. But how will she'll understand. Kairos turned to leave, then stopped. Thank you, Nola. She gave a small, heartbroken smile. Be careful. And make her happy if fate allows. She deserves that. Then Kairos slipped back into the dark, moving with the silent certainty of a man born to these lands. He had work to do, plans to lay supplies to gather dangers to outrun. And he had to warn his people before dawn. Lira sat by her window watching the pale edge of morning push over the mountains. She had not slept. How could she sleep knowing Kairos might be walking straight into Keller's trap? A soft knock startled her. Who is it? It's Nola, miss. With your breakfast. Lira heard the key turn, then the door opened. Nola stepped in carrying a tray, and the soldier outside glanced in briefly before shutting the door again. Nola set the tray down, then took Lira's hand suddenly and squeezed. Eat well, miss, she murmured. You'll need your strength for your journey. Lira stared at her. Journey. Nola leaned close voice, barely above breath. I saw him last night. Your young man. He sent a message. Where the rivers meet. 3 days. Wait for the owl's call. Hope burst through Lira, sharp, fierce, almost painful. You saw Kairos. He's safe for now. But you must be ready. Nola straightened, speaking in a normal tone again. Your father says you may join him for dinner this evening if you're feeling more cooperative. Lira understood instantly and nodded. Please tell father I will be happy to join him. And offer my apologies to Captain Keller. Very good, Miss Nola said, slipping out. Alone again, Lira ate with true hunger. Kairos was alive. He had a plan. In 3 days, she would meet him at the place where 2 mountain streams joined the hidden valley. The place that had always symbolized them. 2 separate lives flowing into one. All she needed was a way to slip past the guards. Simple. Lira smiled grimly. Not simple at all, but possible. And she would do whatever it took. That evening, she joined Grant Dane and Grant Keller for dinner, the picture of repentance. She apologized for her foolish behavior, blamed it on nerves, and nodded politely at every detail of their wedding preparations. Her father looked relieved almost to tears. Only Keller remained wary, his sharp eyes narrowing each time she spoke. I thought perhaps we might move the wedding forward, Grant Keller suggested, as they sat with their coffee in the sitting room. Next week instead of 2 weeks from now. Given Miss Dane's delicate state of mind, a shorter engagement might be wise. Lira forced herself to smile. Whatever you think. Best, Captain. Grant Dane frowned. I'm not sure that's necessary, William. The invitations have already gone out. And Lara seems much improved tonight. Perhaps Keller allowed, though his eyes never left her face. But I've learned it's unwise to delay once a decision has been made, especially when dealing with unpredictable elements. Lira understood the warning plainly. He didn't trust her surrender, and he was right not to. For the next 2 days, she played her role flawlessly. She discussed wedding details with Nola, wrote polite notes announcing her engagement, and even allowed Grant Keller to escort her on a tightly supervised walk around the fort grounds. All the while, she worked tirelessly on her escape plan. The guard at her door changed every 6 hours. The guard beneath her window changed every 4. For a brief moment after midnight, both rotated at once. That would be her chance. On the 3rd night, Lira prepared with the steady nerves of a woman past fear. She dressed in dark clothes, packed the same small bag, and added one crucial item. a rope she had fashioned from her curtain cords and hidden beneath the mattress. Nola had slipped her a pair of sturdy gloves to save her hands during the climb. At midnight, Lira tied the rope to her heavy oak bedpost, testing the knot again and again until she trusted it. Then she tossed the rest out the window, watching it uncoil down the outside wall. It didn't reach the ground. She would have to drop the last few feet. She pulled on the gloves, drew one deep breath, and slipped out onto the ledge. The descent was harder than she'd imagined. The rope burned even through the gloves, her arms shaking violently from the strain. Twice she nearly lost her grip, saved only by raw determination. At the end of the rope, she hung for a breath, gauging the distance. Then she let go. She hit the ground in a heap, pain shooting through her as she rolled to the side. Her ankle screamed when she put weight on it, but she could stand, and that was enough. Limping, swallowing pain, she moved toward the shadows. Her absence would be discovered within minutes. She slipped toward the outer wall. The main gate was too heavily guarded, but she remembered a section under repair from her walk with Keller. If she could reach it unseen. A shout cracked the quiet apart. "The prisoner has escaped. Check the perimeter." Lira ran, no longer careful and no longer quiet, her injured ankle buckling as she forced herself toward the weakened wall. Behind her, lanterns flared, voices shouted, boots thundered. She found the gap and squeezed through. Freedom lay just ahead, the dark sheltering pines at the edge of the clearing. A rifle cracked. Wood splintered inches from her head. Lira bolted into the forest branches, slashing her face as she fled deeper into the dark. The pursuit surged behind her, but she had one advantage. She knew exactly where she was going. The hidden valley lay 10 miles northwest. On foot in darkness, injured, it would take her all night. But she pushed on, following the stars the way Kairos had taught her, north by the North Star, west by the sinking moon. Hours passed. She ran until she couldn't walk, until she couldn't limp, until even limping burned. Dawn found her on the steep trail to the valley, exhausted but unbroken. She had done the impossible. She'd escaped. Now she only had to reach their meeting place and wait for Kairos' signal. The call of an owl, the sound that had bound them together since childhood. She crested the ridge and paused, breath catching at the sight below. The valley lay untouched, glowing under the new sun. 2 clear streams wound together into one river, the same place Kairos had brought her 7 years earlier. Their sanctuary, their future. She stumbled down the slope, every step a stab of pain, until she reached the valley floor. The sun was high by the time she found a sheltered nook beside the larger stream, hidden by thick willows. She sank down exhausted. Now all she could do was wait. The hours dragged. She drifted in and out of sleep, jolting awake at every sound, expecting Grant Keller's soldiers, or praying it might be Kairos. But neither came. The day wore on, slow and merciless, as silence settled around her like a warning. As darkness settled over the valley, anxiety clawed at Lira's chest. What if Kairos had been captured? What if Nola's message hadn't reached him clearly enough? What if the entire escape plan had already fallen apart? Night deepened. An owl called somewhere in the treetops, and Lira bolted upright, heart hammering. But it was only a real owl, not their signal. Then she heard it. 3 short hoots, a pause, then 2 more, their childhood code. Lira scrambled to her feet, ignoring the stabbing pain in her swollen ankle. "Kairos," she whispered. A shadow peeled itself from the trees. Kairos stepped into the moonlight, his expression a mixture of relief and reverence. "Lira," he breathed, her name sounding like a prayer he'd repeated 1,000 nights alone. She ran into his arms and he caught her, lifting her clear off the ground. They held each other for a long time, saying nothing, because the fact that they were together again meant more than any words could. When he finally set her down, Kairos cupped her face in both hands. "You made it." "Did you doubt I would?" She said, a trembling smile breaking through. "Never." He brushed away a tear from her cheek, though his expression remained sober. "But we're not safe yet. Keller's men are everywhere. We need to move. Where will we go, she asked. North, he said. Wyoming Territory first, then maybe Canada. His gaze held hers, heavy with truth. It will be a hard life, Lira. I don't need easy, she whispered. I just need you. His smile rare, breathtaking, flashed in the moonlight. Then we'll find our way together. A twig snapped. Leaves rustled. Kairos stepped in front of her, instantly blade drawn in a single fluid motion. Well, well. Brant Keller's voice slid out of the darkness like a knife. What a touching reunion. He stepped forward, pistol raised. Behind him, 6 soldiers moved into view, rifles leveled at Kairos. How did you find us? Lira asked, her voice hollow with dread. Keller smiled thinly. Your maid was more cooperative than expected once we explained the consequences of obstruction. And I've had men watching this valley for days. Your Apache isn't as clever as he imagines. Kairos's grip tightened around his knife, though he knew its hopeless odds against 6 rifles. Drop the blade, savage, Keller ordered, or my men will shoot you where you stand. No. Lira moved beside Kairos. If you harm him, I swear I'll never marry you. I'll tell everyone what you've done, how you murdered an innocent woman, how you hunted us simply for loving each other, and who, Keller sneered, would believe that the colonel's unstable daughter besotted with an Apache. You'd be pitied, not believed. Beside her, Kairos tensed, calculating, searching for even the faintest advantage. There must be something you want, Lira said desperately. Something other than me. Keller considered, his eyes cold. Perhaps. His life, for your hand in marriage, seems a fair bargain. No, Kairos said quietly. Lira, don't. She turned toward him, tears burning. I can't let them kill you, and I won't let you sacrifice yourself, Kairos said softly but firmly. Not for me. How sweet, Keller drawled. But I'm afraid neither of you gets a choice. Drop the knife, Kairos, now, or they fire. Time slowed. Lira saw Kairos's fingers tighten, saw Keller's finger curling around the trigger. She knew instantly, painfully, what was about to happen. Wait, she cried, stepping between them. There's something you need to know, Captain. Keller arched a brow. And what might that be? Lira drew a breath, steadying herself. I'm carrying his child. It was a lie born of desperation, a last attempt to stop a killing. But the shock that flickered across Keller's face was real, followed quickly by revulsion. You lie, he said, though doubt cracked his voice. It's the truth, Lira insisted. If you shoot him, you'll be raising another man's child. An Apache's child. Is that the legacy you want? Captain Keller's face twisted with fury. You filthy, savage-loving whore. His pistol snapped up, aimed directly at Lira's heart. I'll kill you both. What came next happened faster than memory could hold. Kairos lunged at the exact instant Keller fired. The bullet meant for Lira struck Kairos in the shoulder, spinning him hard, but failing to halt the force of his charge. His knife drove straight into Brant Keller's chest, even as the captain squeezed off another round. The second shot tore into the night, hitting nothing. Brant stumbled backward, staring in shock at the knife hilt jutting from his chest. Blood frothed at his lips as he tried to speak. Then he collapsed into the dust. For a heartbeat, the whole world froze. The soldiers stood stiff and silent, rifles half lifted, unsure what to do now that their commander lay dead at their feet. It was Lieutenant Red Marston who finally broke the stillness, stepping forward with his hand raised. Hold your fire, he ordered. No more killing. Lira dropped beside Kairos, who had sunk to one knee, his hand clamped over the blood soaking his shoulder. How bad is it? She whispered. I'll manage, he muttered, though his face had gone ashen. Red approached carefully, his rifle lowered. Miss Dane, he said, formal but steady. I believe you should know I filed my report this morning regarding the incident with the Apache woman. Lira looked up at him, confused. What does that have to do with us? My report states that Captain Keller sent us out on false information, manufactured a threat to chase a personal vendetta. His eyes held steady. It also notes that the killing of the woman was against orders and is already being investigated as a crime. Understanding settled over Lira like a cold wind. You're saying I'm saying Captain Keller's actions were already under scrutiny. Red glanced at the captain's lifeless body. Now I will report that he died attempting to murder 2 unarmed civilians. Kairos pushed himself shakily upright with Lira's help. Why would you help us? He asked. Red's jaw tightened. Because I saw a man holding the woman he loved in a stream running red with her blood. Because I've watched enough people die. And because sometimes doing what's right matters more than doing what's ordered. He turned toward his men. We found nothing here. No one. We return to the fort and report that Captain Keller was killed by a mountain lion while scouting alone. Clear. The soldiers nodded, some hesitant, others relieved. Red looked back at Lira and Kairos. You both need to get far from here. The colonel, your father, won't easily accept my version of events. Questions will come. Tears burned in Lira's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Red nodded once, then motioned to his men. Move out. They slipped away as silently as they'd arrived, carrying Keller's body into the darkness. Lira and Kairos remained alone beneath the pale moonlight, hardly believing what had just unfolded. Is it over? Lira asked softly. Truly over. Kairos drew her close with his good arm. For now. But we shouldn't stay. Red Marston gave us a chance, we need to use it. Lira rested her head against him. Where will we go? I've hidden horses nearby, he said. We ride north Wyoming first, maybe farther. Wherever the trail leads. He lifted her chin gently. We face it together. That's what matters. Lira reached into her pocket, pulling out the smooth stone he'd given her years ago by Eagle Creek. Do you remember what you told me then? She pressed it into his palm. Now it's your turn to carry it for whatever comes. Kairos closed his fingers around the stone, then bent to kiss her softly at first, then with a fierce tenderness born of survival. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead to hers. The road ahead will be long, he murmured, and uncertain. Lira smiled. But we'll walk it together. Together, Kairos echoed. Always. As dawn spilled over the hidden valley where 2 rivers met, they mounted their horses and rode north, leaving behind the blood-stained dust of the life they'd escaped. Ahead lay an unknown future, hard perhaps, but faced hand in hand. And for now, that was enough. Thank you so much for standing by us through the final moments of this story. If it touched your heart, please remember to subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone who believes in the power of love. Your support means everything and keeps us inspired to tell more tales filled with devotion, redemption, and unexpected turns. At the end of this video, another story will appear. Click it and let yourself be carried into another emotional journey. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deep fake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work